Welcome to episode 104 of Gary King's Inconvenient Truths, where Gary presents videos and stories I don't know are coming for my spontaneous and unrehearsed reaction. Gary, what do you got for me today?
All right. Well, I got a DC Dave clip that is equivalent to 2 cups of coffee. I promise you. And I'm telling everyone that this is not going to be a lightweight show today. Okay.
That's spectacular. DC Dave's a friend of mine. We correspond. I invited him to participate in a false flag and conspiracy conference this year, but he's physically unable to do that. This is quite sensational critique. And interestingly, I learned today earlier that Trump has come out for a two-state solution, which is a noteworthy development. And I'm also a tad apprehensive. He was given between 100 million and 250 million by Miriam Adelson, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate in Las Vegas, who had been a major donor to Donald Trump, but where Sheldon's previous donation to Trump was supposed to secure the moving of the American embassy to Jerusalem, which happened, the declaration that the Golan Heights belonged to Israel, which happened. And since Miriam's donation was in the expectation that he'd approve the annexation of the West Bank, I'm not quite sure where this leaves him in relation to the Israeli movement, even the Mossad. They don't take kindly if they believe they have been double-crossed. And it's entirely possible they may interpret this precisely that way, Gary, in which case, I dare say, all bets are off regarding his life expectancy. I hate to say it. I've been so strongly supportive of Trump for so very long, with the caveat that I was terribly concerned about his seeming 100% devotion to Israel and even to the genocide against the Palestinians. So these are very heartening developments, but I'm not at all sure how it's going to play out now. I applaud Trump for having the insight, the courage, the character to support a two-state solution in the face of what has to be tremendous pressure from Netanyahu, from the Israeli lobby, from Miriam Adelson, and no doubt a vast number of other sources. Many have believed his cabinet includes an awful lot of war hawks supportive of Israel and opposed to Palestinians, when the Palestinians have the clear claim to the lands of Palestine. It's a no-brainer. And it's fascinating that the International Criminal Court has now issued arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu and his defense minister Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, which the overwhelming majority of signatories to the criminal court are willing to enforce, should either land in their territory. So we're in the midst of turbulent times, Gary, but I think DC Dave very accurately, faithfully, emotionally captured what's been going on in Israel for all too long. It must come to an end. In my opinion, we are all Palestinians, qualified only by every decent, responsible human being on face of planet Earth should declare themselves to be, as do I, a Palestinian today. They're in the right. Israel is in the wrong. It's been massive. It's been blatant. It's been arrogant. The superiority complex whereby they assume their entitlement, not merely to the lands of Palestine, but to domination over all the other races who exist in their mind only to serve them, came through packing a powerful punch. Well done, my friend. Well done. Great choice.
Okay. Now you just mentioned this fella here.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region.
Israel's extreme right-wing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has a habit of repeatedly claiming without any evidence that his enemies supposedly have weapons of mass destruction. But a look at some of Netanyahu's public speaking over the past 30 years shows that he has a long history of crying wolf. In a dramatic speech on April 30th, Netanyahu used stage props and a cartoonish PowerPoint presentation to falsely claim that Iran had a secret nuclear weapons program that it had been concealing.
Tonight, we are going to reveal new and conclusive proof of the secret nuclear weapons program that Iran has been hiding for years from the international community in its secret atomic archive. We're going to show you Iran's secret nuclear files.
Netanyahu's speech had a clear political purpose: to sabotage the Iran nuclear deal agreed to by the international community with false and misleading allegations.
Well, tonight I'm here to tell you one thing. Iran lied. Big time. After signing the nuclear deal in 2015, Iran intensified its efforts to hide its secret nuclear files.
Numerous nuclear experts, including Robert Kelly, the former inspector for the International Atomic Energy Agency, said Netanyahu's claims were completely bogus.
I thought many of the things that he presented were very childish. I would think that a country like Israel, that has its own nuclear weapons and has scientists who must be pretty competent, would be able to look at the information we were shown and say right away, well, this is garbage. He presented very early in the presentation a drawing which was supposed to be an illustration of a nuclear device. And you look at that drawing, it's a cartoon. It's a joke. You look at this and you see it's completely amateurish, completely childish, and trying to make something very important out of something that's not important at all.
The Israeli Prime Minister made a similarly cartoonish speech at the United Nations General Assembly in 2012. The performance was another thinly disguised call for war, in which Netanyahu infamously drew a red line and claimed Iran was mere months from procuring a nuclear warhead.
By next spring, at most by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb. A red line should be drawn right here. Before Iran completes the second stage of nuclear enrichment necessary to make a bomb.
Yet this dishonesty is far from new. For decades, Netanyahu has been falsely accusing Israel's enemies of secretly harboring nuclear weapons. As far back as 1990, when Netanyahu served as Israel's deputy foreign minister, he claimed Iraq had a nuclear program that was, quote, fast accelerating. In an interview on NBC News Today show in December 1990, Netanyahu warned of what he called Saddam Hussein's, quote, weapons of destruction.
The question is really, how do we ensure that these weapons of destruction, these missiles, these chemical weapons, the nuclear program that is fast accelerating in Iraq, that these do not pose a threat in the aftermath of the crisis, assuming it gets out of Kuwait. This is an issue for the entire international community.
Netanyahu's weapons of mass destruction lies were even more extreme a decade later. In the lead-up to the war in Iraq, Benjamin Netanyahu testified before the U.S. Congress and claimed there was no question whatsoever about Saddam Hussein's supposed weapons of mass destruction.
There is no question whatsoever that Saddam is seeking and is working and is advancing towards the development of nuclear weapons. No question whatsoever. And there is no question that once he acquires it, history shifts immediately. There is no question that he had not given up on his nuclear program, not whatsoever. There is also no question that he was not satisfied with the arsenal of chemical and biological weapons that he had and was trying to perfect them constantly. Saddam is hell-bent on achieving atomic bombs, atomic capabilities as soon as he can.
In this September 2002 congressional hearing, Netanyahu openly called for war on Iraq and insisted that a U.S. military invasion would be hugely beneficial for the entire Middle East.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations.
Okay, Dr. Fetzer.
Well, you're witnessing repeated performances by one of what history will regard the world's greatest liars, deceivers, con men, phonies, frauds, monsters, actually, because his words have precipitated actions that ought never to have been undertaken. The invasion of Iraq, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld were eager to get control of Iraqi oil. They even encouraged him to invade Kuwait, which was slant drilling into Iraqi fields, and then reversed their position, ordered withdrawal, and when they made a rapid withdrawal, slaughtered the Iraqi army in one of the most grotesque military massacres of history. So this guy, in my opinion, is numero uno, number one candidate for all-time greatest monsters the world has ever known. And believe me, you look at the evidence, he's way out there in front of all the other candidates by many lengths. With this a race of the kind you like so much, my friend. He wins it running away. He's a secretariat of world-class liars. So it's revealing and disgusting to watch him practice his trade, Gary. Thank you for this.
All right. Okay, I know you are a very personal friend. This is a 35-minute clip, so we'll have to cut it off. I hope I cut it off at the right time.
And he also was a combat journalist as well, different combat zones. And he was a big whistleblower, Army Special Operations officer, psychological warfare analyst, and author. And we've been trying to get him on for weeks, and usually we get back with us in hours. And then we got a call yesterday morning from his friend at the hospital. They said he's got pancreatic cancer. He's dying. And he died yesterday afternoon. So I'm going to take a compilation of some of the interviews we did with him and put that on X today. At some point next week, we're going to air some of it here on air. But he's in the Lord's hands. He was a great Christian, a strong man, and 2 years younger than me, or 4 years younger than me. Dead at 46. And he did not look good when I saw him back in mid-July, because I was there to cover Bohemian Grove, and folks infiltrated it. We got new footage. So I was out in California, for a few days when Trump first got shot. He was in San Francisco. He drove up. I interviewed him. And he was there in person. We weren't sitting side by side because I was across the table from him. I had a limited setup. But I'm glad I got to have, dinner with him and drink a cup of coffee with him. A real gentleman. And we love you Scott Bennett. So here's a couple short clips that I want to get to of Scott Bennett, and that's clip 19 and 20, and then I'll come back with some final comments. But vaya con Dios, brother, we love you.
This is a legal affidavit, an oral affidavit. My name is Scott Bennett, former United States Army officer, State Department counterterrorism analyst. This is an affidavit testifying that the area behind me is the place that was struck, the apartment complex, the civilian housing structure that was struck by American and NATO weapons. These are civilian targets. These are not military targets. As such, this is an act of terrorism. This is an act of intentional terrorism meant, designed, and orchestrated to exercise political extortion upon the Russian Federation. As such, this is an act in violation of the United States Constitution, the United States laws, the laws of the several states. This is also a violation of the United Nations Charter as well as the laws of war. This is a affidavit that will be sent to Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, Senate Speaker Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and as such, this is a notice that it must cease and desist this civilian targeting using American and NATO weapons, or else failure to cease and desist will constitute a continuation of war crimes. This is another angle. Just look at the internal world of these people that was suddenly shattered on this first floor, and then above them the second floor, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth. You have books, you have towels, you have toys, you have cookie boxes, you have ironing boards, you have art, you have pictures, all of this shattered in an explosion done by NATO weapons. All of these people that have been empowered.
All right, Dr. Patch, I'm going to go ahead and let you talk now.
Well, Scott was a dear friend and colleague. We did over 200 shows together. I saw in him natural, almost effortless leadership ability. He was highly intelligent, very analytic, insightful. He had a great deal of moral courage and strength, in part derived from his belief in Jesus Christ. Among our last conversations were that if this were the Lord's will, then he would gladly accept his destiny. He died in the morning, not in the afternoon, but he asked me perhaps 2 years ago. He'd been invited to come on Alex Jones, and he wasn't sure he ought to do it. And I said, no, Scott, you should. He has a vast audience, and your message will reach many, many more, that you ought to do it, which he did. I'd early on brought him in with a radio show of his own on Brent's Radio with his dear, perhaps closest friend in the world, Michael J. Anderson, himself a veteran. And when I moved over to Revolution Radio, Scott and Michael J. came along. He would do shows weekly with me on Truth versus News, which was recorded in Seattle, hosted by Don Gron. And I'd present the stories, and Scott and Brian Davidson, a private investigator from Texas with often commentaries, they were superb shows. He'd eventually get his own program, internationally broadcast, Global Great Awakenings. and I and Stephen Pigeon and Mike Harris were featured regularly on a weekly basis. He became a celebrity in Russia for traveling to Ukraine, going through the moves with Russian forces there. They made a documentary about his visit. An American officer in Ukraine, it became a sensation. He was interviewed dozens of times on Russian television, possibly hundreds on Iranian press TV. He was an admirable guy. And at the False Flags and Conspiracy Conference, my 5th annual, a virtual conference accessible to all via Zoom, where you, my friend, are going to assist in broadcasting. The very first session on the 14th of December at 9 a.m. Central Time will feature a series of memorials, testimonies, including David Kinney, who was with him at the end. It was David who called me shortly after his death to tell me Scott had passed. Michael J. Anderson, the dear friend, Don Gron, the host of that show, Stephen Pigeon, and Mike Harris. We're all going to express our thoughts about Scott in his memory. And if you go to my blog now at james.fetzer.org, there are 2 stories about him, one by Joaquin Egobian, who's himself a mighty truth teller, and another that I've described as his last will and testament, which is basically the affidavit he was addressing in that clip from Ukraine. He was an inspiring guy, natural leader, very proud of his Scottish heritage. You saw him in a kilt in one of those images. Very proud, well-spoken, convinced Christian, wonderful patriot. I admired him beyond words, Gary, and thank you so much for including this tribute. He's a guy who made a difference.
Yeah.
And will be missed, but not forgotten.
Yeah, rest in peace, Scott. I told you it wasn't going to be an easy show today.
This is a war that should have never happened. It's a war that Russians tried repeatedly to settle on terms that were very, very beneficial to Ukraine and us. The major thing they wanted was for us to keep NATO out of the Ukraine. The big military contractors want to add new countries to NATO all the time. Why? Because then that country has to conform its military purchases to NATO weapon specifications, which means certain companies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, and Lockheed, get a trapped market. In March of 2022, we committed $113 billion. Just to give you an example, we could have built a home for almost every homeless person in this country. We then committed another $24 billion since then, 2 months ago, and now President Biden's asking for another $60 billion. But the big expenses are going to come after the war, when we have to rebuild all the things that we destroyed. Mitch McConnell was asked, can we really afford to spend $113 billion to Ukraine? He said, don't worry. It's not really going to Ukraine.
It's going to American defense manufacturers.
So he just admitted it's a money laundering scheme. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock. So Tim Scott, during the Republican debate, said, don't worry, it's not a gift to Ukraine, it's a loan. So raise your hand if you think that loan's ever getting paid back. Yeah, of course it's not. So why do they call it a loan? Because if they call it a loan, they can impose loan conditions. And what are the loan conditions that we impose on? Number one, an extreme austerity program, so that if you're poor in Ukraine, you're going to be poor forever. Number two, most important, Ukraine has to put all of its government-owned assets up for sale to multinational corporations, including all of its agricultural land, the biggest single asset in Europe. In Ukraine, there's been 1,000 years of war fought over that land. It's the richest farmland in the world. It's the breadbasket of Europe. 500,000 kids almost, Ukrainian kids, have died to keep that land as part of Ukraine. They almost certainly didn't know about this loan condition. They've already sold 30% of it. The buyers were DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto. Who do you think owns all of those companies? Yeah, BlackRock. And then in December, President Biden gave out the contract to rebuild Ukraine. And who do you think got that contract? BlackRock. So they're doing this right in front of us. They don't even care that we know anymore, because they know that they can get away with it. And how do they know that? Because they have a strategy. And that strategy is an old strategy, which is they keep us at war with each other. They keep us hating on each other. They keep the Republicans and Democrats fighting each other, black against white, and all these divisions that they sow.
Okay, Dr. Fetzer.
That was so excellent, Gary. I can't begin to tell you. RFK Jr. has so distinguished himself in the Kennedy family tradition. He's equal to the legacy of his father and his uncle. He was here a couple months ago, just prior to the election, at the Alliant Energy Center, which is only a 20-minute drive from my home. So I traveled there to meet him and to visit with Tulsi Gabbard once again, where I had just about 5 days earlier, when she made an appearance at a warehouse at a farm that was only 10 minutes drive from my home. And while the total lapsed time for my brief conversation with RFK, during which I gave him the fourth of my books on JFK, who, how, and why, where I brought together like 15 experts on the assassination with updates. And the Secret Service guy just grabbed it when I handed it to him to make sure it wasn't loaded with explosives or chemicals or whatever. And I'm just saying there's more truth in that representation than you've got from all the other political figures in Washington, D.C. combined. He's a completely admirable guy. And if he is able to become the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and it's going to be an all-out battle in the Senate, because all the stooges of the pharmaceutical industry and others are going to be opposed to his confirmation. But I believe Trump, Elon Musk, and others are going to play hardball on this and get him through. It can only redound to the benefit of America and our citizens to have a champion at last in a position where he can do something to improve our health and look after our best interests, because heretofore we've been exploited like guinea pigs by NIH, CDC, FDA, Fauci, and the other rats inhabiting the nest that has become the corrupt outreach of the American government on behalf of the big pharma. So this was an excellent clip exposing the corruption in Ukraine and how all that money's coming back to America. It's coming back to the Democrat Party too. But as Mitch McConnell said so concisely, it's coming back to American military contractors. And it turns out the overall beneficiary is none other than BlackRock, which together with Vanguard and State Street own, I'd say, over a third of Earth's land mass combined. We're in a dire situation. This is among the few heroic figures can act on our behalf. let it come to pass. We shall all be eternally grateful, and even for what he's done to this point already in informing us so clearly of the real state of the nation in matters of health and military policy. Thanks again for this, Gary. Another excellent choice.
Okay, now this is where a lot of our money goes.
So now they're throwing around the word misinformation. Well, was we misinformed when we heard what we heard directly from her mouth?
And the federal relief and assistance that we have been providing has included FEMA providing $750.
And was we also misinformed when the director of FEMA, Mayorkas, came out and said what he said? Or did he misspeak?
We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
Now, since y'all want to say everything is so misinformation and misinformed, I just have a few questions. That's it. Is the critical needs payout of $750 only a one-time payout per household, not per person, and you would need to qualify, which also indicates that you may be denied? Just asking. I have another question. Did FEMA not designate funding of over $1 billion for a illegal migrant program called Shelter in Place in 2023 and 2024? Another question that I may be misinformed about. Did FEMA not designate funding of about $685 billion for illegal migrants in an emergency food and shelter program under this administration? I have another question, because we the people, we want to know. We don't want to be misinformed. Did the House and Senate, including Republicans, not pass a continuing appropriation bill, H.R. 9747, which provides more funding, but the disaster fund is still deficient, according to Mayorkas, because of mismanagement and possibly overspending? You know, that's the bill that y'all are running around and saying that the Republicans shot down or didn't pass. H.R. 9747. Go find it on congress.gov. Wait a minute, I thought of another one, because this may be the one that is misinformation. This is the one. Was there not testimony before the House Budget Committee estimating Americans paying over $150 billion annually to support illegal immigration? No, I got it. It's this one that's misinformed. It's this one. Have they not sent over $64 billion and counting to fund the Ukraine war? Dang, I forgot about this one too. I got a question about this one as well. This one probably is misinformed as well. Did they not send over $17 billion in aid to Israel since last October? And for my last question that I just may be misinformed about, this is the one. I'm misinformed, definitely, with this one. Did she not tweet a couple of days afterwards that she was deeply concerned about the security and well-being of the citizens of Lebanon and pledged a total of $157 million and bringing the support total of $385 million totally? It gotta be that one. And if you didn't catch what I said earlier, they're funding Israel and Lebanon, which Israel struck Lebanon. Just think about it. So no, we're not misinformed. Y'all just misunderstanding that $750 was never enough to give to American taxpayer citizens. So you can miss me on that.
Okay.
Well, I think TikTok has proven to be sensational because ordinary citizens can get their word out there, just as did she here on this occasion, and with total justification. There are endless billions for illegals coming into this country. They're given debit cards, $5,000. They're given cell phones. They're given green cards. They're given accommodations. They're given a food allowance. Why? There's absolutely no justification for any of that. They're criminals. That's why they're called illegal. They're not here in the country properly. They deserve to be deported. And among all the appointments Trump has made, I think this guy who's going to be in charge of the border is equal to the task. But meanwhile, FEMA, Mayorkas, totally betraying the American people, using taxpayer money for illicit purposes and denying support to those Americans who are most in need. It's a disgrace. She did a great job for a citizen speaking out. Well done.
I completely agree, Dr. Fetzer. Okay, this is Pam Bondi, who's, I think, the Secretary.
No, Attorney General. Attorney General.
Yeah, Attorney General. Okay. All right. Now, I do know this much. She's Israel firster. I do know that.
You can't help but be proud to call this country home. But for Joe Biden, it's been the land of opportunism, not opportunity. As a career prosecutor and former Attorney General of Florida, I fought corruption, and I know what it looks like, whether it's done by people wearing pinstripe suits or orange jumpsuits. At the Democrats' convention, we were told to look at Joe Biden as the model of integrity. But when you look at his 47-year career in politics, the people who benefited are his family members, not the American people. Let's take a closer look. We all know about Joe's son, Hunter Biden. A corrupt Ukrainian oligarch put Hunter on the board of his gas company, even though he had no experience in Ukraine or in the energy sector. None. Yet he was paid millions to do nothing. He only had one qualification that mattered. He was the son of the man in charge of distributing U.S. aid to Ukraine. And recently reported information revealed that a few months after Hunter Biden joined that corrupt company's board, the Obama-Biden State Department began doing business with them, even when it remained under investigation for corruption. And it gets worse. That very same company was being investigated by a Ukrainian prosecutor. Joe Biden, the Vice President of the United States, threatened to withhold aid to Ukraine unless that same prosecutor was fired. And then he was fired. Hunter only resigned from that board just before his dad announced his campaign for president. Now let's talk about China. Fact. Joe Biden flew to China on Air Force Two with Hunter along for the ride. They said he was just there as a family member, but we know that's untrue. In Beijing, Hunter didn't just go sightseeing. He had meetings with his Chinese bank partners. Hunter even arranged for his dad to meet with one of the partners. 10 days later, those Chinese communist bankers approved millions to go to Hunter's firm. And those bankers work for the Chinese Communist Party, which oppresses their people, cheated American workers for decades, and covered up a deadly virus. To this day, Hunter controls a 10% stake in that firm. And Joe Biden's done more than look the other way on China. He said, "The Chinese aren't our competition. Come on, man, they're not bad folks." Come on, Joe. Talk to the folks in Middle America who lost countless jobs to China while your son was getting rich with them. But there's more. Fact. There have been numerous press reports that have shown other close Biden family members benefited from Joe's 47-year political career. Joe Biden was point person on Iraq. The president of a construction firm met with Biden's team in the White House, and then who did they hire to build thousands of houses in Iraq? Joe Biden's close family member, who, you guessed it, had no experience in the industry and no experience in Iraq. A company official bragged that it helps to have a family member, the vice president, as partner. The family member put it more bluntly by saying, "There's a line of 747s filled with cash ready to invest." Now let's follow the money down south. Again, as reported in the press, yet another close family member of Joe's set his sights on Costa Rica and Jamaica, where millions of dollars flowed from the Obama-Biden administration in taxpayer-backed loans to projects linked to, yes, that same family member. These aren't isolated incidents. It is a deliberate pattern of conduct. And that's just what he did as vice president.
Okay, Dr. Fetzer.
Well, I think she's very impressive. I thought Matt Gaetz was perfect for the role of AG. They're going to go after him, try to smear him. It turns out to be a very complicated story. Where a guy named Greenberg had been responsible for creating driver's licenses as a subsidiary aspect of his formal responsibilities, and he created fake driver's licenses for underage girls to make them appear to be legal in terms of consensual sex among adults. And Gaetz apparently had a relationship with one of those girls in the mistaken belief that she was of age. She's come out with an affidavit saying she was underage, but to my knowledge, not explaining how it all happened. That, in fact, she was given a driver's license by this Greenberg fellow to make it appear as though she were legal. Gaetz would have sliced and diced. I'm very worried that now that he's resigned from his congressional seat to accept the attorney general, but now he's withdrawn as the attorney general nominee, that his vast talent, ability, drive, determination, and indeed integrity not be lost to the public good. So there's some speculation about him having another position. Pam Bondi appears to be very competent as an attorney general. And while I've heard some concerns about her attitude toward the Second Amendment and the First, the Supreme Court is standing up for the Second Amendment and the First. I even think Trump's plan to punish schools that don't crack down on what's being called anti-Semitism, but which is actually anti-genocide protests, they're not going to withstand judicial scrutiny. They're going to be rejected. You mentioned she's a Zionist. Well, look at his cabinet. Virtually every appointment he's made is a Zionist. The question is whether they're going to have the capacity to put the interests of America ahead of that of Israel. And I dare say, as I learned just before coming on with you today, from a highly reliable source, Trump has now declared himself in favor of a two-state solution, which I welcome and applaud. But I guarantee it places him in potential sights of the Mossad. I understand there are protests already in Israel to dump Trump. They believe they have been double-crossed, and that's not going to go down well with very powerful forces at home and abroad, Gary. So I think Trump has put himself in a highly vulnerable position. I admire him for doing that. It's the right thing to do. But we've seen that before with JFK and with RFK, who also did the right thing and paid for it with their lives. We shall see. I applaud these developments. I do believe Pam Bondi will do extremely well. Trump is being emphatic about having people who are loyal to him because he was betrayed so massively during his first administration by individuals who were not. So I do not object to us having a high loyalty standard. He needs it, he deserves it, and he's entitled to the cabinet of his choice, and let's see whether he can make America great again. Thanks for this clip too, Gary.
All right. Talking to the man on Sandy Hook. So we're going to play this real quick.
This morning, the Sandy Hook Elementary School was full of kids concerned about Christmas. And then at 9:40 a.m., shots rang out.
This morning, the Sandy Hook Elementary School was full of kids concerned about Christmas. And then, at 9:40 a.m., shots rang out.
It was 11 days before Christmas. Not a creature was stirring. No teachers, no children, no principals, no janitors, no school buses, no cars. The hallways were cold, for the heat was off. Yes, the school was closed. The thing is, we have proof from the mainstream media's very own footage. Well, there was no paintings, no snowmen, no popcorn, not even a snowflake. There was no Christmas cheer. The school was closed up. School looked abandoned. The lawn was burnt up. Nothing resembled Christmas in the school. And the beauty of it is, all the evidence comes from them.
Okay, Dr. Fetzer.
Oh, I like that a lot, Gary. I mean, there's some footage there I'd not seen before, but yeah. Wolfgang Halbig, who himself is a nationally recognized school safety expert, has been emphatic about the deplorable condition of the school. When I brought together 13 experts, including 6 PhDs, we established the school had been closed by 2008, that there were no students or teachers there, no janitors, no secretaries, no school buses. There was never any evacuation of what were supposed to be 469 other students there when you subtract 20 who were allegedly killed in the event. You may or may not have noticed there was none of the blue and white signage and parking spaces for handicapped, which meant the school was in violation of Connecticut and federal law for, Americans with disabilities. You saw that wooden staircase. It was not wheelchair accessible, which must be the case for all schools that are in compliance. I learned when members who'd participated in the event, which of course was a FEMA drill presented as mass murder to promote gun control, that the school actually was closed in 2006, that it wasn't even an elementary school, it was a special needs school, which is why there was only one driveway in, not a U-shape, so you could bring buses in, load the kids, take them out without creating a traffic jam. And that Eric Holder had come to Newtown in 2006 to offer the community $114 million. It would participate in this event, which was intended to illustrate for the country what could happen if we don't take guns away from the American people. The individuals who signed on, they had auditions, they receive benefits, they don't pay taxes, they get free college, sign non-disclosure agreements. These benefits endure to this day, and so does a scam, because I've been told it's still racking in $1 million a month, Gary. It's one of the most successful staged events in American history. And I've been doing everything I can to expose it. And as a result, as with Alex Jones, I've been hit hard by the state, in my case, with a lawsuit that led to fines of $450,000 for a purported defamation by declaring a death certificate for one of the purported decedent to be fake, and for seeking to expose that the party who came and testified under the name of Leonard Posner was in fact not the same person identified as Leonard Posner from Sandy Hook. So I'm in a position now, which added on another $650,000. So I've been hit with $1.1 million in liabilities because of this. I'm doing my best to reverse it. I have new evidence. I have 3 appeals before the Wisconsin Court of Appeals District 4. And I believe if they act remotely in accordance with the law, the evidence is so overwhelming that there's a prospect the case may be reversed. Anyone who has any interest in supporting my efforts is welcome to visit givesendgo.com/fundingfetzer if you want to toss a few bucks into the pot, because my efforts are ongoing, and while I am representing myself, there are legal fees associated with cases like this. I'd welcome your support. I'm doing this because we're all entitled to freedom of speech under the Bill of Rights. Even Alex Jones was entitled. It's a defense he ought to have raised from the beginning, but did not. And although I volunteered to be an expert witness on his behalf and to bring the massive evidence published in the book Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, it was a FEMA drill to promote gun control. He declined to do it. In fact, he claimed he'd never even read the book during a video deposition in Connecticut. And yet, when Elon Musk welcomed him back to Twitter, he said he'd been misled by professors and a school safety expert, by whom he meant me and James Tracy and Wolfgang Halbig. But how could we have misled him if he didn't read the book? Because we were in the book. Meanwhile, let me say, I've created a redacted edition of the book, which was banned by Amazon less than a month after it had gone on sale, even though it had sold nearly 500 copies. You can download to your own computer from my blog. Go to jameshfetzer.org and find Fake News, The Truth versus Alex Jones, and you'll see my critique of this video they made to trash him, and how his early reporting actually was on target, where he was denied, but he was taken to the cleaners, and there are a lot of oddities about his trials, where one noted expert was there in Austin, Texas, in the courtroom, and he said it was unlike any courtroom he'd ever seen before. There were 3 cameras, one of which was focused on the jury, that looked to him like a made-for-TV movie. Well, he got it right. You can learn a whole lot more. jameshfetzer.org, Fake News, Truth versus Alex Jones. You can download redacted edition of Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, plus a Sandy Hook Truth Memorandum. I collaborate with Robert David Steele in preparing for then President Donald J. Trump. And you'll get a handle on virtually every aspect of this complex deception, this fraud on the American people. Enjoy.
Yeah, I'm very impressed that you were man enough not to back down, unlike Alex Jones. Okay, we got just enough sand for one more quick clip, and we'll be out of here. Here we go. The Seed Vault.
Do you know why then Rockefeller, the Ford Foundation, and Linda and Bill Gates Foundation, I don't know, are paying for the Stalwart Vault in Norway to keep all the seeds that are not GMO? What is your stake on it?
The question was about why the Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, Syngenta, which is one of the largest GMO corporations, a British Swiss company, why they financed the creation of a nuclear-proof seed vault to store all the seed varieties of the entire planet up near the Arctic Circle, inaccessible by Greenpeace boats or almost anything. What's going on with that? What interest do they have? Well, the BBC, when they did a story on it years ago, called it the Doomsday Seed Vault. I don't know. I can't answer that, but it sure is a scary thing to me. Are they planning to do something to the seed varieties of the entire planet and then be the ones who control what comes out and in what form it's genetically manipulated or not? I don't know, but it certainly is a very scary thing. One of the first things to happen when the U.S. bombed Saddam Hussein's Iraq back to the Stone Age in 2003, Iraq is the cradle of civilized agriculture, the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, Mesopotamia. And there was a seed bank of wheat varieties in a place in Iraq called Abu Ghraib. We've heard about it all through the prison. Well, during the course of the U.S. bombing of Iraq, that seed bank in Abu Ghraib disappeared. Nobody could say where it went. The farmers had to depend on the U.S. AID to get seed.
Okay, let's close it out.
Well, that's very scary. He's got it right, sure. They want to modify all the seeds, so you have to pay royalties to them for the crops you plant. Among the most stupendously stupid decisions ever made by the Supreme Court, where it's been law forever that you cannot patent natural processes. You can't patent the laws of physics, chemistry, biology. Have you created variations on naturally evolved products, organisms, forms of life? You could patent those. And it set off a monster race to control forms of life by developing seeds. For example, corn that is pesticide resistant and can endure exposure to hazards that ordinary crops cannot. And they've also allowed these crops genetically modified to be spread by the wind all over Mexico, for example. So if farmers, unbeknownst to them, were raising crops for which they owed Monsanto a royalty, until the Supreme Court reverses itself, you're going to find this kind of exploitation taking place. And the fact that that seed vault in Iraq disappeared is disturbing to the max, Gary. It was Henry Kissinger observed that if you want to control a government, control their finances, if you want to control a population, control their food supply, they want to control the world's population by way of the food supply. And sad to say, they're making a lot of progress toward that end with the collusion and complicity of a wrongful ruling by the United States Supreme Court. This is very, very disturbing and ought to bother every one of us to our core, because it may be in the future they are indeed able to control the world's population by controlling the world's food supply.
All right, Dr. Fesser, this has been Inconvenient Truths number 104, and I appreciate you for being here once again. Thank you.
You got it, Gary.